There are decisions you make at 2 a.m. fueled by cold brew and righteous indignation that feel like absolute genius. And then there is the morning after. For me, the morning after arrived with the gray, relentless drizzle typical of a Seattle Tuesday. It also arrived with the horrifying realization that I, Oliver Cole, a supposedly harmless and profoundly lazy Omega, had just declared digital war on the most powerful alpha pack on the West Coast. Last night, wrapped in my favorite threadbare blanket, I had logged into my anonymous tech critique blog. Under the moniker Ghost in the Machine, I had dismantled the Vance Corporation's highly anticipated billion-dollar marketing campaign. I didn't just critique it, I surgically eviscerated it, exposing a fatal flaw in their user data architecture with the kind of biting sarcasm that made the internet collectively gasp. The post had gone viral before I even closed my laptop. This morning, the Vance Corp stock was taking a noticeable hit, and the media was in a frenzy. The bounty for unmasking Ghost currently stood at a cool $1 million. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, messy, unstyled brown hair, heavy bags under my eyes. I pulled my oversized, faded gray hoodie over my head, letting the sleeves swallow my hands. This was my armor, the perfect disguise of a salted fish, a guy who cared more about his next nap than corporate warfare. Nobody looking at this slouching, perpetually exhausted Omega would ever suspect the razor-sharp mind hiding underneath. I needed coffee, desperately. I shuffled out of my luxury apartment building, an inheritance from a grandmother that was the only reason I could afford this zip code, and stepped onto the wet pavement. The fog rolling off Puget Sound was thick, muting the city's usual roar. I was 2 blocks away from my favorite underground roastery, completely lost in a mental debate about whether I should delete my account and fake my own death when I heard the voice. It was a voice that didn't just speak, it commanded the very air around it to stand still, deep, resonant, and vibrating with an icy, controlled fury. I don't care if you have to hire every cybersecurity firm in the state. You find this ghost person and you bring me their actual name. By noon. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. I knew that voice from 100 press conferences. Julian Vance, CEO, the eldest of the Vance triplet alphas. Before my panicked brain could command my legs to turn around, I stepped off the curb, my oversized sneakers slipping on the slick Seattle pavement. I pitched forward a clumsy, flailing mess of gray cotton and crashed directly into a wall of solid, tailored muscle. A strong hand clamped down on my biceps, steadying me with effortless, terrifying strength. "Watch it!" Julian snapped, the irritation in his voice sharp enough to draw blood. I looked up, and all the breath left my lungs. Julian Vance in person was infinitely more intimidating than on screen. He was towering, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that somehow remained immaculate despite the drizzle. His jaw was clenched, his slate gray eyes cold and unforgiving as he looked down at me. The scent hit me first. The oppressive, overwhelming weight of an apex alpha, cedar and sharp wood smoke laced with the ozone smell of a coming storm. It was a scent that demanded submission, making my knees go genuinely weak. "Play the part, Oliver," my brain screamed. "Play the idiot." I shrank in on myself, widening my eyes and letting my posture crumple into the absolute picture of a harmless, frightened Omega. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," I stammered, pitching my voice a little higher, letting a sleepy, clumsy slur coat my words. I blinked up at him, looking dazed. "I'm so sorry, man. I haven't had my coffee yet. I'm practically sleepwalking. Please don't be mad." I waited for the disgust. I waited for him to shove me aside like the nuisance I was portraying. Instead, Julian Vance went completely still. The hand gripping my arm didn't loosen, it tightened just a fraction, pulling me perhaps a millimeter closer. His phone still pressed to his ear, slowly lowered to his side. The icy fury in his eyes shattered, replaced by something entirely different. Something darker, deeper, and completely unfocused. I realized with a spike of pure terror what was happening. In my panic, my scent blockers weren't holding up against the proximity of such a dominant alpha. A wisp of my own scent jasmine and warm vanilla sweet and unmistakably Omega was leaking out. I watched Julian breathe in. His chest expanded. The frantic, aggressive edge of his cedar and smoke pheromones suddenly mellowed, wrapping around my vanilla scent like a physical embrace. His pupils dilated. The billionaire CEO, who was ready to ruin a life 3 seconds ago, was suddenly staring at my mouth, completely captivated by basic biology. "Jasmine," Julian murmured, his voice suddenly low, a gravelly purr that vibrated straight through my chest. "Abort, abort, abort." Really sorry, gotta go, coffee emergency. I babbled frantically, yanking my arm out of his suddenly relaxed grip. I didn't wait for him to process it. I turned and practically sprinted back the way I came, abandoning the coffee entirely. I didn't look back until I had shoved my way through the heavy glass doors of my apartment building, gasping for air in the lobby. I leaned against the marble wall, shaking. He didn't recognize you, I promised myself. He just smelled an omega, that's all. You're fine. Go upstairs, lock the door, and sleep for a week. I pressed the button for the elevator. The doors slid open. I stepped inside and hit the button for my floor. Just as the doors were closing, I heard the lobby doors slide open again. Through the narrowing gap, I saw Julian Vance walk in flanked by two men who looked exactly like him, but possessed completely different, equally terrifying energies. Caleb and Wyatt Vance. My blood ran cold. Julian looked up. His eyes locked onto mine through the closing gap of the elevator doors. The doors slid shut, sealing me in a metal box. I stared at the floor indicator panel above the door. Next to my floor button, a new shiny brass keycard reader had been installed overnight. The indicator light for the penthouse, the massive, previously empty suite directly above my apartment, lighted up, glowing a bright cherry red. They weren't just the billionaires I had pissed off online. They were my new upstairs neighbors. For 3 days, my survival strategy was simple: become a ghost in reality, not just on the internet. I ordered groceries online, worked entirely from my sofa, and only left my apartment to take out the trash at 3:00 a.m. I was convinced that if I just laid low, the Vance brothers would forget about the clumsy Omega who crashed into their eldest sibling. They were billionaires after all. They had empires to run, stocks to stabilize, and a highly elusive cyber critic to hunt down. They didn't have time to care about a lazy guy in a gray hoodie. Or so I thought. The universe, it seemed, had a deeply twisted sense of humor, because living directly below a pack of triplet alphas meant that their presence seeped into the very foundation of the building. My first failure at avoidance happened on Thursday evening in the mailroom. I was in my standard uniform flannel pajama pants, oversized t-shirt hair, looking like a bird's nest, shuffling toward my mailbox. I turned the corner and nearly walked straight into a chest that felt like it was carved from marble. "Careful," a calm, measured voice murmured. I looked up. Caleb Vance. He was wearing wire-rimmed glasses and a navy sweater that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. His scent was the first thing that registered petrichor, damp earth, and heavy rain. It was a grounding, quiet scent, a stark contrast to Julian's aggressive thunderstorm. "Sorry," I mumbled, deliberately slurring my words, letting my eyelids droop. "Sleepwalking." Caleb didn't snap at me like Julian had. Instead, he stepped back, giving me space. His sharp, intelligent eyes scanned my disheveled appearance. I expected him to look repulsed. Instead, a strange, quiet curiosity flickered behind his glasses. "You should get some rest, neighbor," Caleb said softly, holding the mailroom door open for me. My vanilla scent blockers were working today, but I could feel his gaze on my back until the elevator doors closed. The second encounter was on Friday morning. I was forced to go to the lobby to sign for a graphics tablet I had ordered. Wyatt Vance was standing at the concierge desk, looking like he had just stepped off a fashion runway in a loose linen shirt and tailored slacks. Wyatt was the youngest to the artistic one, and his scent was vibrant bright citrus, cutting through a deep smoky wood. When he saw me yawning widely by the counter, he actually smiled. A genuine dimpled smile that was entirely too bright for a Friday morning. "Rough night?" Wyatt asked, his voice entirely too cheerful. "Just a rough life, man." I sighed dramatically, signing the digital pad with a lazy scribble. "Naps are the only cure." Wyatt let out a warm, rich chuckle. "I'll keep that in mind. I'm Wyatt, by the way. We just moved into the penthouse. Oliver. Floor below." I mumbled, grabbing my package and doing a sluggish half-wave before retreating. I was doing perfectly. I was cementing my persona as the building's resident, salted fish, useless, harmless, and completely uninteresting. Then came Saturday morning, the elevator incident. I had been up until 4:00 a.m. writing a follow-up critique on the Vance Corp's patch update, completely destroying their attempt at damage control. By 9:00 a.m., my brain was entirely fried. I desperately needed a physical iced latte, not the instant sludge I had in my pantry. I stepped into the elevator, on my floor eyes half closed, clutching my phone. The doors were about to shut when a hand shot out, catching the metal edge. The doors slid back, and all the oxygen immediately left the small metal box. Julian, Caleb, and Wyatt stepped in. The sheer physical presence of 3 apex alphas in a confined space was overwhelming. Their combined scents, smoke, rain, cedar, and citrus, swirled around me, heavy and dominant. I shrank into the back corner, pulling my hood up, staring intently at my worn-out sneakers. Invisible. I am invisible. Julian looked furious. He was glaring at his tablet, aggressively scrolling, undoubtedly reading my latest post. Caleb looked exhausted, rubbing his temples, while Wyatt leaned against the glass wall, sipping from a sleek black coffee cup. No, wait, it wasn't Wyatt's coffee. Julian was holding a cup from Arrow, the obscenely overpriced minimalist cafe down the street. The smell of it drifted toward me in the enclosed space. It was a notoriously terrible dark roast, a fact I had specifically mocked on Twitter just 3 days ago. The board is panicking, Caleb said quietly to Julian. This ghost person's new article just dropped our stock another 2 points. They're asking why our security team hasn't found an IP address yet. Because they are incompetent. Julian snarled, his cedar scent flaring with sharp irritation. He took an angry sip of his Arrow coffee and grimaced. My sleep-deprived brain, running on zero filter and pure reflex, reacted to the smell of the burned beans before logic could stop me. You know, I muttered, my voice raspy from sleep, that Arrow Dark Roast is structurally compromised. It's the flavor equivalent of rushing a beta product to market without QA testing. Pure bitter despair. Silence. Absolute deafening silence. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Oh my God, what did I just say? I had used that exact phrase, the flavor equivalent of rushing a beta product to market without QA testing, in a tweet from the Ghost in the Machine account 2 months ago when reviewing a tech CEO's favorite beverage. It was one of my most heavily quoted insults. I slowly, painfully looked up. Julian had lowered his coffee cup. He was staring at me. The irritation in his slate gray eyes had vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp, terrifying focus. He wasn't looking at a clumsy Omega anymore. He was looking at a puzzle piece that had just dropped into the wrong place. What did you just say? Julian asked, his voice dropping an octave slow and dangerous. Panic, panic, abort. My mind scrambled for an exit strategy. There was no way to talk my way out of this without sounding sharper than the lazy idiot I was pretending to be, so I opted for the only defense mechanism a true salted fish possessed. I went boneless, so sleepy. I slurred loudly, letting my eyes roll back just a fraction. I let my knees buckle, swaying forward as if I had literally fallen asleep standing up. I didn't hit the floor. I crashed heavily against the nearest solid object, which happened to be Caleb's chest. I buried my face into his navy sweater, wrapping my arms limply around his torso, and went completely limp, faking a gentle snoring breath. I felt Caleb's entire body go rigid. For a second, nobody moved. Then very slowly, large, warm hands settled on my shoulders, preventing me from slipping to the floor. The scent of rain and earth flared around me, suddenly wrapping around my faint vanilla scent in a protective, almost possessive cage. I could hear Caleb's heart hammering against my ear, completely at odds with his calm demeanor. He fell asleep, Wyatt whispered, sounding utterly bewildered. I can see that, Julian said, though his voice sounded strained, the suspicion momentarily derailed by the sheer absurdity of the situation. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, praying to every deity I didn't believe in that the elevator would reach the ground floor before my fake snores turned into real hyperventilation. I had survived the moment, but the seed of doubt had been planted in Julian Vance's mind. And alphas like him never stopped digging until they found the truth. By Wednesday, the digital war had escalated. Despite my scathing critique, Vance Corp had stubbornly rolled out their patch update. It was functionally better, I had to admit, but aesthetically, it was a disaster. I was sitting cross-legged on my living room floor, furiously typing up a new thread for the Ghost in the Machine account, tearing into their terrible user interface when a knock on my door shattered my focus. I slammed my laptop shut, shoved it under a throw pillow, and dragged myself to the door. I threw it open, fully prepared to give my best exhausted salted fish glare to whoever was interrupting my workflow. It was Wyatt. He was holding a pale pink bakery box and a sleek silver tablet. The vibrant scent of bright citrus and wood smoke immediately filled the hallway, chasing away the stale air of my apartment. "Morning, neighbor," Wyatt said, flashing that devastating dimpled smile. "I come bearing artisan croissants as a peace offering. I need a favor." I stared at the box. My stomach betrayed me with a loud rumble. "I don't do manual labor," I grumbled, stepping aside to let him in. "Nothing manual, I promise." Wyatt chuckled softly, walking into my messy living room. He didn't judge the scattered clothes or the empty mug on the coffee table. He just set the pastry box down and held out his tablet. I'm consulting on a subsidiary's rebrand. My brothers think this color palette is innovative. I think I've stared at it so long, my brain is melting. Tell me what a normal, non-corporate person thinks. I took a bite of a buttery croissant and lazily glanced at the screen. It was a mock-up for a financial app, and it was without a doubt the most offensive thing I had seen all year. Before my conscious brain could engage its filters, the passionate designer buried deep inside my soul violently woke up. This isn't a palette, Wyatt. It's a visual assault. I snapped, setting the croissant down. I grabbed the tablet, my fingers flying over the screen to zoom in. The contrast ratio between this neon teal and the stark white background is literally illegal under ADA accessibility guidelines. You're going to blind your visually impaired users. I didn't stop there. The words flowed out of me like a dam breaking. And who chose this muddy mustard yellow for the primary call to action buttons? It looks like oxidized copper had a baby with depression. It doesn't scream, "Trust us with your money." It screams, "We will lose your investments in a crypto scam." You need a deep navy to anchor the visual hierarchy paired with a muted gold for accents. This current hex code is a crime against color theory. I tapped the screen aggressively, pointing out alignment flaws and kerning issues for a solid 5 minutes, my voice sharp, authoritative, and completely void of any sleepy slur. When I finally took a breath, I looked up. Wyatt wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at me. His head was tilted slightly, his golden brown eyes dancing with absolute undisguised amusement. The citrus notes in his scent had spiked bright and delighted. Oh my God. He had set a trap. A deliberate, perfectly executed design trap, and I had swan dived right into it. Panic seized my throat. I desperately tried to reel it back in. I widened my eyes, let my shoulders slump, and forced a massive jaw-cracking yawn. I slurred, waving my hand dismissively. The teal kinda matches your shirt. It's fine, whatever. Thinking makes my head hurt. I'm gonna go take a nap now. Wyatt didn't call me out. He just laughed. It was a rich, warm sound that wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. He gently took the tablet from my frozen hands. A navy anchor and muted gold accents. "Got it," Wyatt said softly, his eyes never leaving mine. "You're a genius, Oliver. Enjoy your nap." He left, leaving me standing in the middle of my living room, hyperventilating. He knows. He definitely knows. My anxiety didn't have time to settle because 3 hours later, there was another knock. This time, it was Caleb. "Wyatt said you liked the croissants," Caleb said, his calm voice a stark contrast to my internal screaming. He was holding a fresh cup of coffee, not from Arrow, thankfully. "I brought you a proper latte." "Thanks," I mumbled, stepping back. As Caleb walked in to set the cup on my coffee table, the breeze from the open window caught a loose sheet of paper resting on my desk. It fluttered through the air and landed directly at Caleb's feet. My heart stopped. It was a detailed architectural UI wireframe I had sketched last night. Caleb leaned down and picked it up. For a second, the room felt like it was shrinking. The scent of rain and damp earth filled the space. My mind violently flashed back to New York 3 years ago. I was 22, standing in a sleek corner office, watching my alpha creative director Marcus hold a very similar sketch. "It's cute, Oliver," Marcus had sneered, tossing my design onto his desk before replacing my name with his own on the digital file. "But clients want alpha energy behind their brands. Omegas are for optics, not operations. Just look pretty in the pitch meetings and let the real men handle the architecture." That was the day the passionate, ambitious Oliver died. That was the day I realized the corporate world didn't care about my talent, only my biology. I had moved across the country, buried my portfolio, and birthed the ghost in the machine, a phantom who could destroy the elite without them ever knowing an Omega held the gun. I braced myself for Caleb's condescension. I waited for the dismissive chuckle. Instead, Caleb's eyes traced the intricate lines of my sketch with quiet reverence. His scent didn't flare with dominance, it softened, becoming incredibly grounding. "The spatial awareness here is remarkable," Caleb murmured, looking up at me. There was no pity in his eyes, only profound respect. "Your understanding of user flow it's beautiful, Oliver, truly." He didn't pry. He didn't ask why a lazy guy in sweatpants was drawing master-level UI schematics. He just carefully placed the sketch back on my desk, handed me the coffee, and gave me a gentle, reassuring smile before leaving. I sank onto my sofa, clutching the warm coffee cup completely torn. For months, I had viewed the Vance brothers as the ultimate enemy, arrogant billionaires who needed to be taken down a peg. But reality was painting a terrifyingly different picture. They were kind. They respected my boundaries. They looked at my art and saw me not just an Omega. I looked at my laptop hiding under the pillow, holding the digital weapon I used to attack them. For the first time since I started my crusade, the ghost in the machine felt a crushing wave of guilt. The line between my enemies and my protectors was blurring, and I had no idea how to stop it. The first sign that my carefully constructed life was about to implode wasn't a digital alarm or a frantic email. It was a cramp. It hit me at 11:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting cross-legged on my sofa, my laptop resting on the coffee table, watching the Vance Corp stock take another minor dip after my latest Ghost in the Machine post. The cramp was sharp low in my abdomen and completely out of schedule. I gasped, dropping my mug of tea. It shattered on the hardwood floor, hot liquid splashing against my ankles. Before I could process the pain, the heat followed. It didn't warm me, it ignited me. It crawled up my spine like a live wire, turning my blood into liquid fire and making my breath hitch in my throat. No. My heat wasn't due for another 3 months. I was on the highest grade of pharmaceutical suppressants available. I forced my trembling legs to stand, stumbling toward the bathroom. I practically tore the medicine cabinet off its hinges, grabbing the amber pill bottle. I dumped the pills into my shaking palm and stared at the lot number printed on the side of the bottle. My blurred vision struggled to focus. Lot 409B. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was an automated news alert I had set up weeks ago. I pulled it out in my fingers, clumsy and slick with sudden sweat. FDA issues emergency recall for Omega suppressant lot 409B due to total efficacy failure. The phone slipped from my grasp, falling into the sink with a clatter. I was going into a full-blown, unsuppressed heat. Right now. Panic, cold and sharp, briefly pierced through the rising haze of arousal. I needed to leave. I couldn't be here. 3 Apex Alphas lived exactly 1 floor above me, and without my suppressants, my scent was about to flood the building's ventilation system like a beacon. I dragged myself back to the living room. The air was already thick with it, heavy, suffocating waves of sweet jasmine and warm vanilla. It was cloying, desperate, and unmistakably Omega. I reached for my laptop on the coffee table. The screen was still glowing brightly, displaying the dark mode admin dashboard of the Ghost in the Machine blog. I needed to wipe the hard drive. I needed to pack a bag. Another cramp hit me so violently that my knees simply gave out. I crashed onto the rug, my hand knocking the laptop slightly askew, but failing to close it. My body curled into a tight ball, completely overriding my rational brain. The fever was absolute. Every nerve ending screamed for touch, for weight, for an alpha. Through the roaring in my ears, my laptop sounded a high-pitched, frantic alarm. It was my firewall monitor. Proxy 4 breached. Proxy 5 breached. IP address localized. The Vance Corp cybersecurity team hadn't been incompetent. They had been patient. They had waited for me to log into the admin dashboard to post tonight's critique, track the signal through 5 dummy servers, and trace the physical IP address directly to my apartment. I let out a broken, terrified sob. I was trapped. I couldn't move, I couldn't hide, and they were coming. 30 seconds later, the pounding started. Oliver opened the door. It was Julian. His voice wasn't just loud, it was vibrating with a terrifying absolute authority that made my Omega instincts simultaneously cower and purr. I tried to speak to tell him to go away, but all that came out was a soft, high-pitched whine. Nah, the IP is definitely coming from inside. Caleb's voice said from the hallway, muffled but clear enough. He locked us out of the system, but the physical location is exact. Oliver, I swear to God, if you don't open this door, I am breaking it down, Julian snarled. He didn't wait for an answer. A deafening sound of cracking echoed as the heavy oak door splintered around the deadbolt. A second kick sent the door flying open, slamming against the drywall. Julian, Caleb, and Wyatt stepped into my apartment. They looked like an execution squad. Julian was in a dark suit, his slate gray eyes scanning the room for the corporate spy who had been making his life a living hell. Caleb had a tablet in his hand. Wyatt looked furiously tense. Then they hit the wall of my scent. I watched it happen. I watched the exact moment the corporate fury died, completely swallowed by pure primal biology. Julian stopped dead in his tracks. The tablet slipped out of Caleb's hand, hitting the floor. Wyatt let out a ragged breath, his pupils blowing wide. The room was instantly flooded with a dizzying, suffocating mixture of cedar rain and citrus. Their alpha pheromones flared violently, crashing into my jasmine scent and twisting around it in a heavy, possessive cage. I was curled on the rug, wearing nothing but loose sweatpants and a thin t-shirt, shivering violently, drenched in sweat. I looked up at them, my eyes wide and hazy with tears completely at their mercy. Jasmine. Julian whispered the word, tearing out of his throat. It was the exact same tone he had used that first morning in the rain. Wyatt was the first to move. He took a slow, agonizing step forward, his eyes locked on my trembling form. But as he stepped closer to the coffee table, his gaze flickered to the glowing screen I had failed to shut. Wyatt froze. He stared at the admin dashboard. He stared at the drafted post, the analytics, the unmistakable, undeniable proof of the ghost in the machine. Wyatt slowly looked from the laptop down to me. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting for the disgust. I waited for them to realize that the Omega they were biologically drawn to was the same phantom who had cost them millions. I waited for the anger to return. Julian, Wyatt said, his voice entirely devoid of shock. It sounded dark, deeply, terrifyingly dark. Look at the screen. Julian and Caleb moved closer. The silence in the room stretched thick and suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I braced myself for the yelling. Instead, I heard the sound of the laptop being gently clicked shut. Well, Caleb murmured, his voice a low, gravelly purr that vibrated straight through the floorboards into my bones. Our little salted fish has teeth. I opened my eyes. Julian wasn't looking at the laptop. He was staring down at me, and there was no anger in his eyes. There was only hunger, a dark, consuming, absolute hunger. He slowly reached behind him and pushed the broken apartment door shut, clicking the secondary lock into place. The cybersecurity team can wait, Julian commanded, his voice dropping an octave heavy with smoke and cedar. He unbuttoned his suit jacket, letting it drop to the floor. Right now, our Omega needs us. Waking up didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, agonizing drift upward through a sea of heavy, impossibly warm blankets. My body felt completely boneless, pleasantly exhausted in a way I hadn't experienced in years, but it was the scent that registered first. The air in the room was saturated with it, a deeply complex, intoxicating blend of sharp cedar damp earth and bright wood smoke. It was infused into the expensive silk pillows woven into the heavy duvet and lingering heavily on my own skin. Pack. My Omega instincts purred a low, contented vibration deep in my chest. I was safe. I was claimed. I was protected. And then, my rational brain violently booted up, bringing the memory of my living room floor crashing down on me. The heat, the shattered door, the three of them surrounding me, and the laptop. The glowing, damning screen displaying the ghost in the machine dashboard. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't in my messy, mismatched apartment. I was in the master suite of the penthouse. The walls were painted a calming slate gray, and the morning light filtering through the floor to ceiling windows was painfully bright. Panic, cold and sharp, instantly replaced the lingering warmth of the heat. I shot up in bed, clutching the duvet to my chest with trembling hands. My breathing turned shallow and erratic. "It's over," my mind screamed. They know everything." I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself for the inevitable. I knew exactly how this played out. I had lived it in New York. The moment an Alpha in power realized an Omega had crossed them, the warmth evaporated. The possessive affection would instantly curdle into contempt. They were going to sue me into oblivion. They were going to destroy my credit, seize my assets, and make sure I ended up in a federal prison for corporate espionage. I had single-handedly cost their company millions in stock value. The bedroom door clicked open. I flinched, curling into a tighter ball, pulling the duvet up to my chin like a fragile shield. I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the expensive Persian rug, unable to look at them. I couldn't bear to see the disgust in Julian's eyes. I couldn't stomach the disappointment I knew would be etched into Caleb's face. Footsteps approached the bed. Not angry, heavy boots, but soft, measured steps. "Hey," a gentle voice murmured. The scent of bright citrus and wood smoke washed over me. "Wyatt." I heard the soft sound of ceramic being set on the bedside table. "I brought you some chicken broth. Dr. Chen said you need to rehydrate slowly. Your fever broke about 4 hours ago." I didn't move. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. The mattress dipped slightly as someone sat on the edge of the bed. The grounding, calming scent of rain and earth surrounded me. "Caleb." "Oliver," Caleb said softly, his voice a low, steady rumble. "Look at us, please." I don't have the money." I blurted out, my voice cracking, the words tumbling over each other in a desperate, pathetic rush. "I don't have $1 million to pay you back. You can take my apartment. It's fully paid off. But please don't send me to jail. I'll delete the blog. I'll write a public retraction. I'll do whatever Vance Corp's legal team wants. Just please." Silence filled the room. It was thick, heavy, and completely suffocating. I finally forced myself to look up, tears blurring my vision. Julian was standing at the foot of the bed, wearing a dark Henley and sweatpants, his arms crossed over his chest. Caleb was sitting beside me, looking devastatingly sad. Wyatt was standing near the nightstand, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. There were no lawyers. There were no tablets with drafted lawsuits. Julian let out a long, slow breath, uncrossing his arms. He walked around the bed and knelt on the floor right beside Caleb, bringing his face level with mine. The sharp, dominant edge of his cedar scent had completely vanished, replaced by a warm, protective blanket that made my Omega instincts weep with relief. "Oliver," Julian said, his voice incredibly rough, "do you honestly think we care about the damn stock price right now?" I blinked, a tear spilling over my lashes. "But the blog. I'm the ghost. I've been tearing your company apart for months." "We know," Wyatt said, gently sitting on the other side of the bed. "We saw the screen. And you're not going to ruin me." I whispered, my voice trembling violently. "The only thing we want to ruin," Caleb said, his dark eyes fierce and uncompromising, "is whoever made you believe that hiding behind a fake name and a baggy hoodie was the only way you could be safe in this world." A sob tore itself out of my throat. It was ugly and broken, the sound of 3 years of repressed trauma finally shattering. "In New York," I gasped out the words, spilling uncontrollably. "My creative director, Marcus. I designed the entire flagship UI for a major bank. I worked for weeks. He took it. He put his name on it." Julian's jaw tightened dangerously, his alpha pheromones spiking with a sudden lethal protective fury, but he kept his voice deliberately soft. "What did he say to you, Oliver?" He told me Omegas are for optics, not operations." I choked out, wiping my face with the back of my hand. "He told me the corporate world wanted alpha energy, that my talent didn't matter because my biology made me weak. So I quit. I moved here. I decided if they only saw me as a useless Omega, I would play the part perfectly. I would be a lazy, unmotivated salted fish in the light, and I would tear their arrogant empires down in the dark." I looked at Caleb, my chest heaving. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I targeted you. I was angry and I was bitter, and it was so easy to hate you from a distance." Caleb didn't hesitate. He reached out and pulled me firmly into his chest, wrapping his strong arms around my trembling shoulders. The scent of rain enveloped me completely, grounding my chaotic heartbeat. "You don't ever have to apologize for surviving, Oliver," Caleb whispered into my hair. "You used the only weapon you had left to protect yourself." Wyatt placed a warm hand on my knee over the blanket. "And for the record, your critiques were brilliant. Aggravating, infuriating, but absolutely brilliant. You have a sharper architectural mind than half the engineers on our payroll." I pulled back slightly from Caleb's chest, looking at Julian. The eldest brother was still kneeling by the bed, his slate gray eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that took my breath away. "Marcus was a fool and a thief," Julian stated, his voice a low, vibrating vow. "He looked at you and saw a weakness to exploit. We look at you, Oliver, and we see the bravest, most brilliant person we have ever met. Your mind is a weapon, and your heart—" He reached out, gently cupping my cheek, his thumb wiping away a stray tear. "Your heart is ours." I leaned into his touch, the last remnants of the ghost in the machine's armor crumbling into dust. I wasn't a phantom anymore, and I didn't have to play dead to survive. For the first time in years, I was completely terrifyingly seen, and I was safe. The aftermath of a broken fever and a shattered emotional wall was a strange, floaty kind of exhaustion. I remained tucked against Caleb's chest for a long time, the heavy scent of rain and damp earth acting as an anchor, while the last of my tears dried against his sweater. Julian hadn't moved from his spot on the floor beside the bed. His hand was still resting gently on my knee, his thumb tracing slow, grounding circles. Wyatt had gone to the kitchen and returned with a fresh glass of water, waiting patiently until I was ready to sit up. For the first time in 3 years, the crushing weight in my chest was gone. But as my rational brain slowly re-engaged, a new highly practical anxiety began to itch at the back of my mind. I gently pulled back from Caleb, clearing my throat. "So," I rasped, my voice still thick, "the emotional apocalypse is over, but we still have a billion-dollar elephant in the room." Julian raised an eyebrow, his slate gray eyes sparkling with an amusement I didn't quite understand. "Do we—" "The ghost in the machine." I reminded him, gesturing vaguely toward the living room, where my laptop was presumably still sitting. "I appreciate that you aren't going to throw me in federal prison, but I still single-handedly tanked your Q3 marketing launch, and the board of directors is still hunting me. I assume you need me to hand over the passwords so your legal team can quietly dismantle the site." Wyatt let out a sudden bright laugh. It was a rich, booming sound that startled me. He walked over to the bedside table, picked up his sleek silver tablet, and handed it to me. "Oliver, sweetheart," Wyatt said, his dimples flashing. "Look at the screen." I took the tablet, bracing myself for a drafted NDA or a public apology statement. Instead, I saw lines of complex, encrypted code. It was a server traffic log, but it wasn't the Vance Corp server. It was my server, the back-end hosting of the Ghost in the Machine. I blinked, zooming in on the data. What is this? This firewall architecture is military grade. I didn't write this. Someone has been running active countermeasures on my server for, I checked the timestamps, my jaw dropping, for 5 weeks. "Give or take a few days," Caleb murmured, shifting his weight on the mattress. "Ever since a certain sleepy neighbor spent 5 minutes aggressively tearing apart my brother's teal color palette before dramatically faking a nap." I froze the tablet, slipping slightly in my hands. I looked slowly from Caleb to Wyatt to Julian. "You knew," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You knew since the croissant incident." "I suspected it when you insulted my Aero coffee in the elevator," Julian corrected smoothly, finally standing up and taking a seat on the edge of the bed next to me. But Wyatt confirmed it with the color palette. "Your syntax, your design vocabulary, your sheer uncompromising rage regarding user accessibility, it was identical to the Ghost." But my brain was short-circuiting. "If you knew why, didn't you shut me down? The company bounty, the cybersecurity team tracing the IP." "Ah yes, the cybersecurity team," Julian said, a wicked, distinctly alpha smirk playing on his lips. "Who do you think has been blocking the doxers from finding your real name? Who do you think was systematically deleting the threats from those rabid tech bros on Reddit who wanted to hunt you down?" My mouth opened and closed silently like a fish out of water. "We didn't deploy our security team to hunt you, Oliver," Caleb said softly, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. "We deployed them to guard you. You were poking a lot of very rich, very angry bears online. We had to make sure you were untouchable." "Wait," I gasped, pointing an accusing finger at Wyatt. "Last week's patch update, the one with the terrible kerning on the submenus. You guys have the best QA testers in the industry. Did you push a bad UI update on purpose?" Wyatt looked entirely too proud of himself. "Julian bet me $1,000 you wouldn't notice the 2-pixel misalignment. You noticed it in 4 minutes. Best $1,000 I ever lost. Your rant was poetry." I covered my face with my hands, letting out a sound that was half groan, half laugh. "You three are absolute sociopaths. I was having panic attacks thinking I was destroying your empire, and you were treating my blog like an interactive Tamagotchi." Gentle hands wrapped around my wrists, pulling my hands away from my face. Julian was leaning in close, the scent of cedar and wood smoke wrapping around me, heavy with absolute sincerity. "We didn't want to break the Ghost, Oliver," Julian said, his voice dropping to that gravelly, vibrating pitch that made my omega instincts purr violently. "We just wanted to bring him home." He gently kissed the inside of my wrist, sending a jolt of electricity straight to my heart. "Marcus was a coward who was afraid of your brilliance," Caleb said, leaning in from the other side, his presence a steady, immovable mountain. "We are not. We want all of it. We want the lazy, exhausted guy who shuffles around in oversized hoodies, and we want the vicious, brilliant architect who can bring a boardroom to its knees with a single keyboard." Wyatt knelt beside the bed, resting his chin on the mattress, his golden brown eyes looking up at me with utter adoration. "Be our salted fish in the light, Ollie, and be our phantom in the dark. Just be ours." I looked at the three of them, 3 Apex Alphas billionaires who controlled half the tech industry, kneeling around my bed, offering me not just their protection, but their complete, unreserved respect. They didn't want to cage me. They had literally built a digital fortress so I could continue to scream my truth at the world safely. The last stubborn shard of ice in my heart melted completely. I didn't overthink it. I didn't panic. I just reached out, grabbing the collar of Julian's Henley, and pulled him down into a fierce, desperate kiss. Julian groaned a deeply primal sound, his arms instantly wrapping around my waist to crush me against him. The kiss was a collision of cedar and jasmine, a complete surrender of my armor. Caleb's large hand settled warmly on the back of my neck, grounding me, while Wyatt pressed a soft, smiling kiss to my temple. The Ghost in the Machine had spent years fighting a solitary war against the world, but as the pack bond fully clicked into place, humming with a warm, golden certainty in my chest, I knew the war was over. I had finally found the one safe place to land. A year is a strange measurement of time. In the corporate world, a year is 4 quarters of grueling fiscal warfare. But in the grand scheme of a lifetime, it's just a blink. Yet in exactly 365 days, my entire universe had been rewritten. I was currently sprawled upside down on a massive, obscenely comfortable modular sofa. My legs were draped over the backrest, my head hanging off the edge of the cushions, and I was wearing a faded, oversized hoodie that I had definitely stolen from Caleb. Outside, the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse Seattle was doing what it did best, weeping a steady, rhythmic curtain of gray rain against the glass. But inside, the climate was entirely under the control of 3 apex alphas, and the air was thick with the safest, most intoxicating blend of scents I could ever imagine. Cedar and smoke, damp earth and heavy rain, bright citrus and warm wood. Woven perfectly through it all was the sweet, mellow hum of jasmine and vanilla. My scent, not suppressed, not hidden behind chemical blockers, but blooming, freely acting as the binding agent that tied the entire pack together. I didn't officially work for Vance Corp. After the incident, as we collectively referred to my heat-induced unmasking, the board of directors had practically begged Julian to hire the ghost in the machine as their chief aesthetic officer. I had politely but firmly declined. Corporate offices gave me hives, and I firmly believed that pants with buttons were a tool of capitalist oppression. Instead, I had negotiated a far more lucrative, highly classified position, Supreme Strategic Consultant. My office was this sofa, my dress code was pajamas, and my salary was paid entirely in artisan pastries, endless cups of perfectly roasted coffee, and an obscene amount of forehead kisses. I still ran the Ghost in the Machine blog. Julian had insisted on it. He argued that the tech world needed its harshest critic to keep it honest, and more importantly, he found my ruthless online persona incredibly attractive. The only difference was that now Vance Corp's cybersecurity team actively maintained my firewall, and I got to view all their beta projects weeks before the public did. "Ollie," a voice called out, pulling me from my phone screen. I tilted my head back, looking upside down at Wyatt. He was standing near the expansive glass balcony doors, wearing paint-splattered linen pants, a brush tucked behind his ear. The scent of bright citrus spiked happily as our eyes met. He was working on a massive canvas, and from this angle, I could see it was an abstract explosion of navy and muted gold, the exact color palette I had yelled at him about a year ago. "Stop moving your left arm," Wyatt scolded gently, his dimples flashing. "The drapery of the hoodie is perfect right now. I need 10 more minutes to capture the sheer, unadulterated laziness of your posture." "I am a muse," I declared grandly, letting my arm go completely limp. "Muses do not take direction. They simply exist in their perfection." A low, rumbling chuckle came from the leather armchair across the room. Caleb was sitting there, wearing his wire-rimmed reading glasses, a thick architectural history book resting on his lap. He reached up casually, pushing a stray lock of dark hair out of his eyes, his grounding rain scent washing over me. "Our muse is going to get a headache if all the blood rushes to his brain," Caleb noted, turning a page of his book. "Though I suppose it might help him find a flaw in the new payment gateway wireframe I sent him last night." I already found 3 flaws. I bragged, typing furiously on my phone with one hand while keeping my left arm perfectly still for Wyatt. "Your backend team used a recursive loop for the loading animation. It's aesthetically redundant, and it's going to drain the battery life of older smartphone models by at least 4%. It's an insult to optimization." "Noted." Caleb smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'll have them rewrite it on Monday." Footsteps echoed from the open concept kitchen, steady and measured. Julian walked into the living room, dressed in soft, dark sweatpants and a fitted black t-shirt that did nothing to hide the broad lines of his shoulders. The sharp, commanding scent of cedar preceded him, instantly making my omega instincts purr. He was holding a steaming ceramic mug. The rich, dark aroma of a perfectly pulled espresso shot filled the space. It was decidedly not from Arrow. Julian walked over to the sofa, leaning over the backrest so his face was inches from my upside-down one. His slate gray eyes were incredibly soft, devoid of the icy CEO persona he wore for the rest of the world. "Coffee, my brilliant phantom," Julian murmured, his voice that low, gravelly pitch that always sent a shiver down my spine. "You're enabling my caffeine addiction, Mr. Vance," I whispered back, taking the mug carefully. "I'm enabling your genius." Julian corrected, leaning in to press a lingering warm kiss to the corner of my mouth. And I'm making sure you have enough energy to finish your latest critique. The board has been refreshing the blog all morning, waiting for your verdict on the Q3 interface patch. I took a sip of the coffee. It was flawless. I pulled myself upright, settling comfortably against the cushions, and pulled my laptop onto my knees. The ghost in the machine dashboard was glowing in dark mode. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a second. I looked around the room, at Wyatt humming softly as he painted my portrait, at Caleb reading in peaceful silence, at Julian, who had sat down next to me on the sofa, his large hand resting casually, protectively, on my thigh. A year ago, I was fighting a lonely, bitter war against a world I thought only saw my biology, not my mind. I had built a fortress of sarcasm and baggy clothes to survive, but sitting here now, anchored by the humming, golden warmth of the pack bond in my chest, I realized I didn't need the armor anymore. I turned back to the screen and began to type. Vance Corp's new Q3 interface patch dropped today. Miraculously, the color contrast ratio is actually legally compliant with ADIA standards this time. The navigation flow is surprisingly intuitive, and they managed to avoid using a single shade of oxidized depression mustard yellow. It's almost tolerable. Given the sudden lack of eye-bleeding design choices, I can only assume the CEO and his brothers have finally been domesticated by a partner who is actually feeding them well and correcting their terrible taste. I hit publish. 3 seconds later, 3 distinct chimes echoed through the quiet living room. Wyatt paused his brushstrokes, pulling his phone from his pocket. Caleb marked his page and picked up his tablet. Julian didn't even reach for his device. He just leaned over to read the published post directly off my laptop screen. Silence descended on the penthouse, save for the sound of the Seattle rain tapping against the glass. Then Wyatt started laughing, a bright, echoing sound of pure joy. Caleb shook his head, a fond, helpless smile spreading across his face as he looked at me. Julian's chest rumbled against my shoulder. He reached out, closing my laptop with a soft click, and pulled me flush against his side, burying his face in my neck to breathe in the heavy scent of jasmine. Domesticated. Julian repeated, his breath warm against my skin, his alpha pheromones flaring with utter, uncompromising devotion. Is that what we are? I slumped against him, letting out a loud, exaggerated yawn, perfectly playing the part of the exhausted salted fish. You're whatever I design you to be, I mumbled, closing my eyes and letting the warmth of the pack swallow me whole. Now shush. The Supreme Strategic Consultant needs his nap. And as Caleb threw a soft blanket over my legs and Wyatt went back to painting our shared piece, I knew with absolute certainty the ghost had finally found his permanent haunt.